It's 3 a.m. and you've been struggling to sleep. And your brain is just on fire, just going into the most, doing the most really at this point. And you'll find yourself at this point thinking about this situation that you're facing. And you're imagining the worst case scenario. You've probably run it through your mind 100 plus times, mapping everything that could possibly go wrong. But what if I told you that up to 85% of all these negative outcomes that you're imagining won't even happen? And you might be wondering, why 85%? That seems like so oddly specific. I'll explain that later, but I'll say like where I got it from right now. From a Penn State University clinical psychology study on generalized anxiety disorder. But before that, landmark studies that were done to track people's daily anxieties in real time over extended periods of time, researchers discovered that nearly 90% of disasters that people had imagined failed to materialize. And surprisingly enough, the 15% that actually did happen, the participants, handled the fallout a lot better than they thought that they would. So now let's explain the study that was done at Penn State. So researchers wanted to know more about anxiety in itself, so they hired some participants and they gave them digital journals and told them to write down every specific worry or predicted negative outcome as it came into their heads throughout the day, every single day, for weeks. And then months later, the researchers went back and evaluated everything it is that their participants wrote. And the results that they found were really surprising. 85% of the worries that the participants had presented, never actually happened. The researchers took it a step further and looked closely at the 15% of bad events that actually did happen. In 79% of those real-life cases, participants reported that they handled the situation significantly better than they thought that they would, or that the outcome was vastly less painful than their minds had imagined. And so from this, you might be wondering, okay, what's the point? Why is anxiety there at all if it's just we're gonna end up handling the situation much better than we think that we would? That all just comes down to our brains and how they were designed to help us be safe and keep us alive. And this actually goes way back. For example, early humans had a lot of things that they had to be anxious about. Like for example, early human goes out to hunt and hears a rustling in the bushes and he thinks it's nothing. He thinks it's just the wind. It turns out it's a saber-toothed cat and he gets mauled. But there's also the other hand where early human goes out and he hears a rustling in the bushes again and he assumes that it's the saber-toothed cat. He runs away and he lives. And in this case, it turns out it was just the wind. So maybe he's a bit tired, maybe even winded, but at least he's alive. And biologists call this error management theory. We as people have what's called a negativity bias, and this causes us to assume the worst possible scenario every single time. So what happens when you try to simulate a bad event happening from your mind's perspective when you try to think about it? There's two things that happens. Well, first, we tend to overestimate the intensity and duration of the pain that we're going to experience. So you can assume maybe in the case of a breakup, you tend to think of it as something that will permanently devastate your happiness for months and even years. And secondly, another thing that we do is when we simulate the event, we tend to view ourselves as helpless victims, but when the actual crisis hits, when something actually happens, our brains will shift gears and will turn into problem-solving experts and our adrenaline will spike and we'll suddenly be able to actually handle the situation. And you won't be as fragile or as helpless as you were picturing yourself to be in your mind. So now that we know that this is the case and we're not nearly as helpless as we might imagine ourselves to be when we're simulating these situations, what can we do? Well, there are some practical things that we can try to do to get ourselves out of these anxious, anxiety-inducing mental loops. The first thing you can do is just take a hold of those thoughts. Like when immediately an anxiety-inducing thought comes into your mind, just seize it. And you can ask yourself, is there any evidence that this thing that I'm thinking about right now will actually happen? Is there any evidence against what I'm thinking right now? And just Even it might actually help to write it down physically. At least you can see it. You know that there's a sense of control there. You can see the hard facts staring at you in the face, and you can just proceed from there. And that will help because it will take out the emotional toll of out of this anxiety inducing thought that you might have, because that's what usually anxiety relies on. It relies on our vague emotional state and our probabilities about what will actually going to happen based on what we're feeling at the time. So facing the actual facts of the situation will cause you to start to think in that sense of, this is actually what I'm faced with, how can I proceed from here? And another thing that you can try to do is map out a middle ground, because our brains might tend to take us into one of two directions, like absolute perfect 100% best case scenario, or absolute worst case scenario, total destruction, my life is over kind of sense. And so instead of that, whenever you're faced with a thought that might be anxiety inducing, we can force our minds to make three branches. One for like absolute best case scenario, hooray, my life is fixed. One for more realistic, mundane, middle ground kind of scenario about, okay, realistically speaking, this is probably what's gonna happen. And then one for the absolute worst case scenario, my life is over. And so you can divide into these categories, and you force yourself into having some kind of middle ground, just in case neither of what you had imagined for best case or worst case scenario happens. And then third is make a contingency plan. So what is this? Well, one thing that you can try is write down the next 3 steps that you're going to take if this thing that you're anxious about right now actually happens. What are the first 3 things that I'm gonna do? Like, let's say you have a presentation and you actually need your laptop to present, and the thing that you're panicking about is, what if my laptop freezes and shuts down mid-presentation? You can say, oh, what am I gonna do? First thing, I'm just gonna ask for a bit more time from the teacher or whatever. I'm gonna go ahead and ask my group members if I can use either one of their laptops, and I'm just gonna keep presenting from there. Or something more realistic that actually pertains to your situation. And another thing that you can try is, you can try and run the same experiment that they were running on Penn State, this time on yourself, where let's say you have an upcoming event or something that you're really, really dreading. Just write down the date of the event. You can write down what exactly is worrying you about the event, and then once the event happens, you can go back 2 weeks later and rate how it actually went on a scale of 1 to 10, as opposed to how you might have thought it was going to go on a scale of 1 to 10. And then you can watch, and the more that you build up those moments of realizing that, I actually made it out of that situation. I was actually able to, like, my worries, what I was really thinking about was going to go wrong, didn't actually happen. So you start to have a sense of control, a bit more confidence, and you can just go from there. So the next time you find yourself really, really dreading something, and it's like 2 in the morning, you can't even like sleep on it at all, you can remember that approximately 85% of what you're fearing won't actually happen. And for the 15% that does happen, you probably have a whole lot of past experiences to show you that you're not weak or helpless in any sense. You're actually far tougher than you might give yourself credit for. And there's a lot of evidence to back up that fact. And this should help you to build your confidence in that way. So now you can go ahead and like comment below or something. Has there ever been a situation that you felt was going to be the absolute worst when it actually ended up turning out better than you thought? And yeah, hope you enjoyed.